Hi everyone, I'm Susan Birch and welcome back to another A Health Detective podcast. And today I want to introduce you to my very good friend, Rob Nugen. Rob and I have amazing conversations every week along with another of our friends, Anna. And last week we were talking about men and men's needs. And so we thought that it would be a great idea to do a podcast called One for the Blokes. And Rob can talk a little bit about some of the programs he's involved in and how these are established for men by men to help men. So Rob, thanks for coming along.
Thank you. I want to be hi Anna as well.
Yeah, well, we normally have hi Anna, but
yeah.
Anna is away with her new little baby.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's very exciting.
Well, thank you for having me on the show. We've been talking about it for a while, so I'm glad we could get it sorted out.
Yeah, I know. And we were having this amazing conversation last week, and I was thinking, gosh, I wish I'd pushed record.
Yeah.
All right. So tell us a little bit about yourself. You live in Japan and you're from the USA. Gosh. And yeah, just give us a bit of background.
Thank you. I was raised north of Houston, Texas, in the United States, and had a sense of not fitting in with my peer group there, which may be a common experience in high school. Maybe no one seems to fit in, so to speak, but a lot of the cultural preferences in Texas for drinking and the music and stuff is like it's not really for me. And I went to high school and university in Texas and was just on the edge of getting married. Hi, Wendy. And I realized that I wouldn't be happy if I got married with her because she was a Texas girl. And at my heart, I'm like, I gotta travel. I need to get out and about. And it was a really difficult decision and realization. But I knew I had to be true to my heart that I would have to separate to break up our engagement. And she and I have remained friends, but her family, I never spoke to them again. I don't imagine that they've ever forgiven me, so to speak. But yeah, so I traveled around the US a bit and then came to Japan in 2003, thinking that I would learn Japanese and then lead youth group tours from the US into Japan. But I'm too lazy to learn the language. It is really challenging. It's like level 4 on the scale of language learners for English learners. And yeah, anyway, I've been here for nearly 20 years at this point. And yeah, it's so hard to summarize, all this stuff. Some of the important bits, though, we're talking about men's group stuff. In Texas, I had attended the Mankind Project's New Warrior Training Adventure in 1997. I attended. And my then girlfriend, Wendy, saw such a big difference in me after just this single weekend training, in my way of being, my way of communicating, my way of taking responsibility for my actions or inactions. She could see the difference and was like, that's interesting. And she therefore attended the women's version, Woman Within. And I've described it many times that our ability to communicate just skyrocketed, that we stopped the blame game. We stopped, we started taking responsibility for our own choices and our own situation. And it was just so wonderful in the way we were able to communicate, that when I realized that I couldn't marry her, her response was literally, okay, and I'm quoting, okay, what do we need to do? She knew it was nothing about her. She knew it wasn't like a personal attack, like, oh, you're not good. We're past all of that. And just by virtue of having done this inner work, it was amazing to be able to have that huge topic in a simple, clear, adult kind of way. It's like, all right, that's different than I expected, and I can deal with it, and we can move forward, and we'll figure it out together. So it's really powerful to have that training behind both of us, and having that experience to get through the humps and bumps in life in a good way. So came to Japan, and I looked around, I was like, someone should bring Mankind Project to Japan. And that was before I found out that someone had done that, but it wasn't a very well advertised group. I joined the group for a while, and then it fizzled out. And then I got married, and I was like, uh-oh, I need to have my men's group again. And so that was now 6 years ago at this point. I restarted the Mankind Project weekly meetings here, just 6 or 8 guys now on Zoom, but talk about like what's really happening in our lives. It can be really empowering to be able to have that safe space. So yeah, that's been a huge part of my life and my growth. And I'm now doing another group that's for women as well, called Bold Life Tribe, which has its own flavor. We have a whole year program, basically looking through different archetypes and aspects of life and how we engage the world around us. So it's been a powerful framework for living, by having these very deep introspective questions about how we want to live the world. So,
and it's Bold Life Tribe available, is that on Zoom as well, which means that
yes,
anybody can join from anywhere around the world with the right time?
Yes. Yeah, given a time zone. We meet at 7 p.m. Thursday nights, Japan time. But yeah, there are other groups around the world that are doing the Bold Life Tribe as well. But yeah, on Zoom.
I know you'd like to talk more about the Bold Life Tribe, but let's just start with the Mankind Project, because I really did want to do one for the blokes. And I think there's so much stuff for women out there now. And I think it's really important that we respect that men are, a part of this human race as well. And I think there's so much acknowledgement of the struggles that women have faced over the years, and challenges in the workplace, sexually, being able to be heard. But I've got 3 sons and 3 brothers, and grown up in a bit of a man's world in a lot of ways. And I think I see that men have challenges as well, and sometimes I feel that women, we contribute quite a bit to the challenges that men face, and that we kind of really demand these days that we're heard and seen, and everything is fair and equal as much as possible. But we don't always see how a man's perspective is going to be about that.
And yeah, speaking to that, there's lots of expectations about how men maybe should act or ought to act, and that there's no allowance for men to act to be however they want to be in any given moment. It can come from within the peer group as well, like some expectations of how we should be together, and what topics to talk about. And sometimes it can be hard to just talk about like a real heavy topic, so to speak. I'm feeling sad today, I'm feeling afraid, and allow that to be okay, and be okay with hearing someone say these things without having to try to fix it or anything, and just be present with the person. So it's important to be able to have a safe space or a safe way that we can communicate these more sensitive topics, and have that be normal, and not be like, oh my God, did you hear something? It's like, yeah. Everyone has their own issues that come up, and just let that be okay, and not talk about it or anything beyond the space. Just be present with the individual.
So is there a lot of pressure amongst men when men are just together to be a certain way? Is that what you're saying? And that you don't, and that it's not always comfortable? Because we're always spilling our guts, so to speak. We're always talking about our emotions and our feelings, and our relationships, and most women's conversations have a lot of that as the basis of their conversation.
Right.
How I feel, how I'm doing, what's happening in my various relationships. So is that, is that something that happens with men, or when men are together?
I will say, to your question, no, that's not something that happens with men. Now, my experience is different, as I've surrounded myself with men who are willing to talk about these types of things. But if I'm not in a men's group meeting, then the topics generally don't move that direction unless I kind of open the space to allow that conversation to come up. And in some cases, I am successful, so to speak, and we can talk about something. But generally, it's not. It's the other topics about which I'm not particularly interested. I love the real open-hearted type stuff. But yeah, to your question, seems it's not as common to be able to talk about relationship type stuff, and have to keep it more on a surface level of not the weather, but like the work or sports or whatever.
Yeah.
And possibly about the kids, but not necessarily like, oh, how do I feel as a father kind of thing. And these kind of just one step away from the topic of kids, there's this like, oh, now I'm a dad, now what? And as you may know, there's no owner's manual for kids. I mean, you got to figure it out. And so having a space to be able to admit, I don't know what I'm doing, is important.
And that changing relationship with a child's mum as well, because once a woman becomes a mum, the relationship dynamics change, and her focus changes, and her sex drive changes, and everything changes.
Yeah, and that's a natural process that isn't really talked about usually in a understanding kind of way, more like a blaming way. It's like, oh, what about me? I have that come up sometimes, but I need to share that with the men's group, and not necessarily, it's not going to be a good conversation with my wife if I'm talking about that all the time, kind of thing. So.
And last week we were talking about suicide and the number of young men who commit suicide. And I think I said something to you about, I see on Facebook regularly these statements from men saying kind of, hey, bro, if you're feeling down, I'm here for you. But those also feel sort of slightly superficial as well. Like, would anybody really take that up? I don't know how a man would feel about that. Seeing that, if you saw that, would you think I could go and talk to my best mate about this?
Right. The one thing that I found to be true about someone who's having suicidal ideations, that it's an extremely dark space and can take a lot of time to work through all that which is happening, and to lay it all on one person as the resource to talk about everything can be overwhelming for that single individual. And some people who have talked about suicidal ideations have mentioned they don't want to just dump on their one friend or what have you. And that's where the suicide hotlines and crisis lines come into play, that it's an anonymous third party kind of thing, and the kind of leaning on an organization as opposed to individuals can make it more sustainable, for one thing, and allow the friendship to not take too much pressure on of how to save it. But it's a very nuanced type of topic. Friends, of course, a friend doesn't want his friend to die, and how do I prevent that from happening? So if suicides do happen, the shock around the community is huge, and has, in some cases, has domino effect, which is exponential disaster in those circles. So I've lost track of your original question, but is someone really willing to answer to that kind of hey bro, I'm here for you? I don't know. It would depend on the individual. Does it seem like an actual legitimate offer? It would probably have to be repeated before I could hear it. It's okay, I trust that this person can actually listen. And so there's obviously myriad nuances, and each situation will be different. But I also sometimes write that to my friends, hey, come talk to me, if you need to talk. And it doesn't always get a reply. Sometimes it does. And so just let it be as it is.
And as you said, it's a very nuanced conversation. And I know that you've worked on suicide hotlines and things like that. So you've got a much better perspective than I do. Is there, in terms of reaching out, and we didn't want to make this podcast about suicide, but just a question, in terms of reaching out on places like hotlines, is there predominantly women or men or an equal mix, or who would be more likely to ring up and say, hey, I'm feeling like this, and ask for help?
The equal mix is a very short answer.
Right.
And also equal mix of ages as well, from school children to adults, although the children would be less likely to know how to look up that kind of resource. So the lifeline that for which I volunteered sometimes goes into schools and be like, hey, we're here for you, kind of thing, to let that be known that it's even an option, because a kid's not going to know that magically, that there is help available. But yeah, so equal across genders and across the generations as well. And yet there's a very high number of like male suicides, partially apparently because men are more successful at it.
Okay.
And I don't know like why that would be necessarily, but maybe the lethality for men more willing to see some blood or something, and so it gets real dark real fast. And but I have heard that men are more successful, so to speak, at suicide attempts.
Yeah, and I could understand that they're more willing to do something that was more violent to themselves than a woman perhaps who may overdose on drugs or something like that.
Right.
All right, well, let's move on to a slightly more cheerful topic. And let's talk about the benefits of, a group like the Bold Life Tribe and ENDS project. And, what takes place, what kind of things do you talk about? How do you relate to each other?
Yeah, the two organizations are quite different, I'll say. Like Mankind Project was founded in 1985, I think, mid-80s in Chicago. And it was founded, my version of the story, I wasn't there, but some guys were like, how would it be if we stop using alcohol to get real with each other and just really open our hearts and talk to each other about the real topics that come up in life? And from that starting point, they developed a weekend initiation process, the New Warrior Training Adventure, which is like a modern day analog to kind of what has been part of like growing into a man for a long time. But we've lost this concept of initiation for boys to become men. I was 20, like as an anecdote, I was 27 when I realized I was a man. And yet physically I had been a man for quite a few years. And it wasn't until I attended it's NWTA, New Warrior Training Adventure, in 1997, that I realized my hand was as big as my dad's hand. It's like, oh my God, when did that happen? It was mind-blowing to me to realize I was physically a man, though I felt like a boy. So back to the original thing, like this concept of initiation into manhood is something that has been lost from my culture. And Mankind Project is bringing this concept back into the language. Like, what does it mean to be a man? How do I want to be a man? What's my vision for my life? And bringing these big, deep questions to normalize them, to be able to talk about real stuff. Like, I want to do this and I'm scared, so now what do I do? And different ways of looking at the topic of individuality. What kind of legacy do I want to create for my life and for the world around me? Kind of. So that's like the MKP in a nutshell. And there's myriad different trainings that they're doing. We should put into into the links for this podcast, like mkpusa.org, and they've got dozens of trainings that look at different aspects of, how I want to be a man in the world. And it's been an amazing organization for me in that regard. So the other one that I'm participating in, Bold Life Tribe, was founded a couple of years ago and is designed to take this conversation for like men and women together, looking at the individual self specifically from different topics, like the topic of truth, or the topic of passion, or like mission, or stepping into action, and these different ways of engaging with the world and engaging with the self that all start with the self and self-awareness. So we have in the Bold Life Tribe monthly, basically themed topics that we use throughout the year. And it's like an annual cycle to go through the 4 archetypes, the warrior, lover, magician, and sovereign, to bring all of ourselves, like all different parts, to treat them all as important. All parts of us are important. They're here for a reason, and to have the space to rely on all of those aspects of ourselves is quite powerful. So the Bold Life Tribe looks in detail at different topics throughout the year.
And can you explain those archetypes a little bit more, what's involved in each one of them? And is there a tendency for men to express more of one than another,
Yeah, that's 2 questions in one.
Yeah,
the archetypes being I used the word sovereign before, but king, warrior, lover, magician, and as the 4 male archetypes, which some people argue that they're not really real, but they are a foundational way to think about things. So it's just a model. But the warrior being in love with life and in touch with the body and in touch with nature, and seeing things with bright new eyes, and like, wow, the world is beautiful. That's like the lover energy. The warrior energy is like, all right, we have a task, we have a mission, let's go do it, whatever it takes. And just like, so it's using that more that might be more the archetypally masculine energy of like, go forward, doesn't matter what, and drop all the emotions. More individual, whereas lover is more like, oh, we're all a family and it's all connected. And then warrior being more focused and directed. We have a specific task, let's go, kind of thing. Clock is ticking. Then the magician archetype is about having knowledge in the world, knowing all of the options that are available to us, being able to look at a situation, figure out what is needed, and share that information with the 4th archetype, the sovereign, who then decides what's best for us, what's best for the realm. I'm trying to stay away from the kingdom, but like for the realm, and making a choice among the options that have been offered by the magician archetype. Say, okay, I believe this is the best way to go, and tell everyone to get on board. Warrior, this is where we're going. So the warrior's like, okay. Warrior doesn't decide where to go, but the warrior knows how to get there once the sovereign energy decides where to go. So that's a quick roll around through the archetypes. And I would say men are welcomed to be warriors in the external physical sense, from movie scenes that are very warrior-esque. And then as men get older, welcome to be in the sovereign energy, like the old man, the old sage kind of thing. And so that's a typical concept of a sovereign energy. And the lover and the magician tend to be downplayed or looked as not as masculine, is my sense of how that might be described, but yet in fact are all part of one human being. We all have all these different aspects.
And that's interesting. I think we had a conversation at one stage about, nice guys is, why, men will say, I'm a nice guy, like, why don't the women like me? Because I treat them well and I'm a really nice guy. And why do they always like the bad boys who don't, treat them rough and they love it? I mean.
Yeah, it's I was taught to be a good boy. And like when my dad went on business trips, he'd say, you're the man of the house now. And now I look back and I'm like, God, don't say that to a 5-year-old. That's ridiculous, But I was taught to take care of my mother. And I look back now, I was like, oh my God, So yeah, this sense of like have to be good for mommy or have to take care of mommy or to be a good boy has been like drilled into me since I was very young. And that's a huge burden to kind of to grow up in. And as I'm saying that, I'm thinking about the many other burdens that are options in this world we're in. But that has been my experience, that I have to be good and be nice. And that's where the book No More Mr. Nice Guy came from. Suddenly forgot the author's name. And the recommendation there is like to take care of the self first. And I haven't read the book in a while, but that we have, many of us have been taught to be good without allowing for it to be okay if we're not always good, and that we might need to ask for help and this kind of thing. It's been somewhere earlier in the conversation, I was thinking about this sense that I ought not ask for help and need to solve it by myself, which is an extremely challenging way to go about things. So this ability to ask for help has helped me a lot in my life, and was very difficult to get to that stage. I'm not fully there, so to speak, but I am more able to ask for help. But yeah, I was taught for a long time I'm using Japanese almost, to ganbarimasu, to do my best to not need external resources.
Because it's not manly to ask for help.
Right.
And it's interesting.
Let me flip that over. Like, it is manly to know I need help and to be okay with that, and to therefore ask for help and to be willing to accept help and know, hey, I need help, and that's okay. So changing the way that message is seen is an important part of what I would like to share today.
Yeah, I really like how you reframed that. I think that's an excellent way of reframing. And I was just going to say, you were talking about self-care for men. I'm always, I work mostly with women. I do work with men, but generally my clients are women, and we talk a lot about self-care and the guilt around self-care, and women women struggle with the concept of, not putting their families, their children and their husbands or their partners first. And, I should always be looking after everybody else before I look after myself. So is that something similar for men? Just probably expressed in a different way, perhaps.
Yeah, thank you. That's exactly it. It's expressed in a different way, but like, got to go out and, make the money and go out and, have a good job. These kinds of ways are kind of built into the fabric of the culture. Like have to produce a safe place for the family to be raised, and make that be the priority over self-care. Where I've talked a lot of this conversation as if I have kids, which I just to be clear, I don't have kids. And what I've seen, though, that the men who have children would in fact do anything for their children, and I absolutely understand that. I say that, so I absolutely have heard that many times, and at the same time, like, modeling self-care, I think, is an important part of it. And I don't know where the actual balance point would be for that. But if I'm just guessing, if the dad only takes care of the family without taking care of the self, that's training for the kids to only take care of their families eventually. And so my sense that there must be some kind of a balance point.
Oh, it's interesting you say that, because that's what I talk about with women all the time is, yes, I'm a mum, I've got 4 kids. I totally get that they're the priority of your life. But if you're always putting them first, you're not teaching them to put themselves first.
Right.
Yeah,
so same thing I'm saying, right?
Yeah, it's exactly what you're saying. And, unless we look after ourselves first, we can't really look after anybody else properly. And we end up with, all sorts of dysfunctional relationships and family dynamics and mental health issues, because we haven't learned to say no and actually put our needs first. And even like for me, even though I know this, it's still a struggle not to think that that's being selfish,
Right.
Even though I know that it's not being selfish. So it's a really interesting concept.
Yeah. The one like example that any of my friends would know is that we are asked to put on our own life mask first on the airplane and then help others. And it's just an extension of that same concept. If I'm dead, I can't help you, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so again, everything is there's a balance for everything. There are stories of heroes that they go save kids in the fire and whatever, and yet there's got to be a balance at some point. So sometimes it's hard for me to talk about being a man while I don't have kids, and it looks like this lifetime that's not going to happen. And so I just got to get over myself and still hold this like space for men to be able to talk about these topics, regardless of if I think I'm a real man or not. It's important to be able to have this space and to talk about these things, but just like acknowledging that there's all different kinds of ways that we appear in the world. And by having the hard conversations helps to know who I am for each individual in the group, to not like kind of shrink back, say, oh, whatever you guys want. It's like, no, this is what I want. And, we work out the best way to have a we conversation as opposed to just an I conversation. And that goes into a deeper level of communication, but like the nonviolent communication model is a very good model for being able to talk about my personal desires in a way that's including the other person in the conversation and doing it in a safe way. So that's kind of a basis for having the topics where we need to work out something that is different between us. And it's the basis for solving conflicts and in a good way.
Have you got some examples of how you would use that?
Yeah. So here's a bad example is, you made me feel angry, or you make me angry when you blah, 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 when you do something. And a different way of saying that is like, I have a need for clarity. And when the answer I'm hearing has changed from minute to minute, I get confused about what you want. That's terrible, maybe a terrible example, but it's more acknowledging the need. I would like clarity. I'm hearing this answer, and now I hear a different answer, and I'm unsure of what's actually happening around me. It keeps it about the self. There's a little bit of a conversation, like this is what I saw happening, but I'm still just acknowledging my side of things and what I have control over.
Right, yeah. And it's expressing a willingness to oblige and fulfill the request or whatever
That was, that kind of thing
was asked of you. But if the terms of that change and you don't understand that the terms are changing or why they're changing, then that leads to that. That leads to that tipping around, feeling like you're walking on eggshells all the time and tipping around, tiptoeing around. And I think that probably applies in both directions. I think women feel like that sometimes too. They feel that they want to do the right thing and be supportive, but it feels like the goalposts are always moving. So so that's a great example. And taking responsibility. And you talked earlier about taking responsibility. So how does that look? How does that look in an example? I mean, that was just one that you gave then, but
around the topic of anger, if it's like I'm trying to go to work and there's someone slow in front of me, it's like, you slow person, why can we curse on here? It's like, why are you walking slow in front of me when I want to walk fast? I'm mad at you, kind of thing. And it's like, all right, that's one way of seeing the situation. So the taking responsibility part includes, how did I get myself into this situation in which I'm experiencing anger? So I made a choice to leave at a certain time, even though I know traffic gets busy. And, I made a choice to think that it's important to go to work on time, so I've chosen this goal. I chose the starting point. And so those are both in my control. And I'm choosing to be angry despite having set up a situation that was necessarily going to make me late in this case, in this example scenario. And so just becoming aware of that allows me to feel, sounds weird, but to feel more powerful. It's like, wow, I created a situation where I can create anger in my life. I can create lateness in my life. That's amazing. And then turn it around and say, okay, what would I prefer my experience to be? And so, start earlier, kind of thing. So it helps give this kind of awareness of my choices, helps me know that I can make different choices. And then let me give a different example that, like, let's say I left on time, the traffic was as slow as I expected, and I get a flat tire. And it's like, all right, now who am I going to get mad at, kind of thing. And so in these cases, I'm not going to get to work on time. So have a conversation to renegotiate the agreement. So recognizing that I'm helpless in this situation to not have a flat tire, which I have now, to contact the work and say, the boss, and be like, hey, boss, I'm not going to get there at the predetermined time. So we need to just to let you know that whatever your expectations were, they're not going to happen today, kind of thing. And so again, taking responsibility if I need to make a change in the agreement, and then sort out the flat tire in the best way that I know how, and then move on with life. So just having this a level of consciousness that's like just a bit back from falling into the emotions and into letting them sweep me away is a good recipe for living a chaotic life. So being able to step back consciously, notice the emotions as they happen, helps me maintain self-awareness and to maintain more a sense of control and actual control within life. And I'm not perfect at it by any stretch. Like, got mad at my wife this morning, and we worked it out. But it was again about the timing. Anyway, she said 7, and it turned out to be 7:19, and then my like warrior self was like, hey, that 7:19 isn't 7 a.m. What are you talking about? And she's like, what are you talking about? Different ways of seeing the world. And we were able to work it out. But I just had to recognize that that was a we conversation. It's not just all about me. Let's go for a walk at 7. What time is 7, and how important is it that we actually 7:0 0 on the dot? Doesn't matter. Yeah. But it mattered to me in that moment, and I felt frustrated. So to be aware of that.
And then, so if we go back to the changing the tire situation, and the boss is then angry. So the boss is angry, Rob's not at work. Rah.
Yeah.
So then how
I have
deal that? How do we let other people take responsibility for their feelings?
That in itself is impossible. To let someone else take responsibility for something I have no control over how the boss reacts. Recognizing that I have no control is in itself liberating. And not take it personally. Like, okay, I happen to know this particular boss doesn't see the world the same way that I do, and allow that to be okay. And if it's not okay, if it happens repeatedly, maybe have to renegotiate the job somehow, find a new job. And I know I'm talking very flippantly about big topics, but I had an experience once of a boss who got very angry at me when I called her out on her behavior, that she would come to each cubicle and say, good morning, good morning, good morning, like very fast. Good morning, good morning, good morning. I was like, oh, she's counting us. She's checking to see who's here. She's not actually caring to say good morning, because there was no conversation in that. It happened every day. Good morning, good morning, good morning, at the same time. And I emailed her, and this is like, I was a new employee. It's like, not new, but my first job. So my boss's boss's boss, I had sent an email. I was like, hey, boss, I forgot her name. I feel sadness with a hint of anger. And I know I'm quoting because it came up in the topic, that if you were just trying to count us, just let us know you're checking to see who's here. And she got so mad about that. She said, this is insubordination. So I was called into her office, and my boss and his boss were already in her office. I'm guessing she already talked to them about it, but then I was brought in there. And she said, how can you say that you're pissed off because of this and this? I didn't say I was pissed off. I said, I feel sadness with a hint of anger. She basically, my version of the story as the hero here, she lost her shit and she was attacking me. It's like, how can you say this is a insubordination? Literally wasn't what I said. And she was very exaggerating this claim that I was pissed off. No, I wasn't, so I was like, no, it's in the email. She checked her email and was like, oh, well, looks like that's not what he wrote. And it became a non-issue, and a few of my peers congratulated me and thanked me for saying something. But I just had to hold my space and to know I was doing. I made a choice. I didn't realize there would be that level of repercussion, but I thought it was important to speak honestly about it. And for me, it's telling that kind of response came back, that it wasn't a safe place for this kind of conversation. And maybe she did have something to hide, so to speak, or that she was ashamed of her situation. So I'm making a lot of assumptions about what may have been on her side, but it was a surprising response at the time. And I was very proud of myself for holding space.
How do we stop ourselves ruminating about these kinds of things? How do we step back?
Yeah.
Accept our own responsibility for where we're at, because we always play some part in everything that happens to us, pretty much, and accept our own, the responsibility of the role that we played, and then be able to stop replaying the story over and over again in our heads.
I would love to have one magic bean answer to what you just described, and I don't have one. The short version is that it takes time, and I use meditation, I use breathing, I use acceptance, self-acceptance, these different types of techniques that allow for things to be as they are. And now I'm 52. I've had 52 years of training, to according to the TV, to try to change the world and all of this. All right. My wife and I say, everybody calm down. We use that as a way to help diffuse the situation. Everybody calm down and just breathe, just be here. And so you went over a whole list of things that, how do we do these things? It takes practice. It takes forgiveness if I don't get it right the first 500 times, but it does get better, and it does take time. One interesting, oh gosh, what was the movie? The concept was that as a human being, we're starting over each lifetime. Don't even know how to use these wiggly arms and bodies and stuff. Like, what the hell is going on as an infant? And yet the technology in which we are born never loses its memory. And there's necessarily a lot of catch up that a human has to do each time. And we were even born without even fully formed brains. I mean, this stuff takes time. And it because technology purports to have all of the answers, and it has its version of what we should or should not be doing, it can take a lot of inner will to continue to focus to the inside, despite the setbacks and despite the answers coming out of the TV, just to go inside. So to answer your question, it's like about giving yourself space and time and allowing yourself to mess up and to let that be okay. Just looking at your behavior as a thing that is, to say, okay, this is. Where do I have the ability to make change? And I can't make 500 changes all at the same time. The brain doesn't process that many things at the same time. Like 3 or 4 things at once, and the rest is just gone. So just allowing your being to take time to grow and to all of that. I don't even know if that's an answer to your question, but that's what comes up at this point.
No, it's very good. So let's just get back to your projects a little bit before we wrap this up. So can you just summarize, I was going to say summarize the benefits. That's not even really like in the vein of the conversation that we're having. But can you just summarize for people listening to this, and men and women, because you've got programs for both?
Yes.
How belonging to these groups may help them and enhance their lives, and why getting in touch with this other side of ourselves is so important. And for me, the last 18 months or more that you and Anna and I, who just randomly met of and have met every week pretty much, for more than 18 months. The benefit of having, because Anna is very calm as well, and and I tend to be a little bit more like has been enormous for me, just the energy, the taking a pause and looking at all those other sides of myself, and that's not actually the focus of why we meet, but that's one of the added benefits that come,
right?
As even though that's not why we have it, and that's not why we actually catch up every week, but that has been a tremendous benefit to me, and I've mentioned that to both of you a number of times. And it's really helped me calm down. And
good.
Yeah, it is good. And, in the beginning, it was really frustrating because I always wanted to go so fast, and it felt really hard to go slowly and patiently. But now I really enjoy it, and I feel like I have really slowed down, and I'm far more patient and slower and tapped into, into some of those different aspects, archetypes in my own, in my own self. So how, if men wanted to tap into these Zoom meetings, and women, what would be the expectations? How would it feel,
Well, your first part of the question was, what are the benefits? Summary, I would say we are each having a lived experience that can feel isolating if the rumination is happening and it's like, oh, woe is me. This type of energy can feel very isolating. And there's a phrase in the MKP group, your work is my work, meaning when I see a person who's really getting down into the nitty-gritty of the emotional experience of their lives, I can see there's so much of me that resonates with that lived experience. So the details may be different. I recognize, oh, I'm not alone. There are other people who share this sense of fear or sadness or anger or whatever it may be. And that in itself, as humans are social animals, can be liberating, like very like, wow, I'm not alone, I have family kind of thing. So it's a summary of the benefits is like to feel supported, to feel that I have a safe place that I can talk about these topics, and other people also have similar experiences in their lives. As far as the second part, what it can be expected with the for Mankind Project, there's many different trainings that are available, but a starting point is simply answering kind of deeper than normal questions, like not just how was your day, but when is a time that you didn't keep an agreement, and what was the impact on yourself and those around you? And so without any kind of shame or blame, just acknowledging I had an agreement, I didn't keep it, this was the impact. And that helps empower me to realize, oh, so that is possibly how that person felt if I, didn't show up on time. Very true. In our case, we started late because I messed up the time. And so it may be that Susan doesn't trust me, and maybe she is worried about me. And so these different potential impacts are explored within the group as we look at our own behavior. Another topic, a common question be like, yesterday the topic was, in what way do we rely on others for, I lost the word, to positive, oh gosh, what was it? So how do we rely on other people to get our needs met is the summary. I'm missing a key word there.
Was it validation?
How do we get validation in the world? Okay, I tell funny jokes. And then the next question, how do you get validation in ways that are not in alignment with your long-term values? Oh, now the question gets a little bit deeper, okay, let's get real here, so for me, the validation that I recognize, I'm also doing work that's not in alignment with my true heart focus. Like I'm also doing programming work, and it pays the bills, but it's not in alignment with what I want to be doing more. So that's a long-term value that I'm kind of giving up for the validation of like having a job and like making sure that the boss has their needs met. So, but have that awareness as a result of that conversation. So that's what one can expect in the introductory levels of the Mankind Project, and it goes into, there's deeper levels like about accountability and having a life mission, how to create a mission for oneself, and how to create systems so that we stay in line with our mission. These are some deeper level trainings that come up. and then it can go quite deep into like the various isms from racism and genderism and socioeconomicism and different things, and what role do I play in that part of this interconnected network that we're in. So the depth of trainings. So that's on the MKP side. On the Bold Life Tribe side, there's basically, like I said, there's a 1-year program. We're looking at these different aspects of life. And coming up is the spiritual warrior, the external warrior and the spiritual warrior. What the internal warrior would be like a coach or a teacher or a mentor that like has the energy to move forward. It's happening a lot on the internal level to, how do we guide another in a good way? That's coming from an internal energy. Then external warrior is like, how do we take action in the world? And is it in line with my long-term vision of what legacy I want to leave? So these are different topics that we look at in the Bold Life Tribe program. So warrior coming up, and then getting into the joy of life and the I lost the list in my brain. But then as we get into the sovereign energies, like, what is our legacy that we want to leave behind, and how are we going to see ourselves at an age 100 looking back, what do we want to have done in the past? And so that gives us a viewpoint now from the future. Is like, oh, I need to get my stuff together.
Yeah.
The old quote, we have 2 lives, and the second one starts, do you know the rest? When we realize we only have 1 life. And it's like, oh, damn, I better get moving.
Yeah.
So that's the Bold Life Tribe program, to look at different aspects of our lives.
And do you generally have younger guys or a mix of ages? I'm thinking about older men. Does this resonate well with older men as well?
Yeah, for everyone is living their own experience, and for everyone, the time is right now.
Yeah. And
whether we like compare ourselves to other people and like who's younger or older, it all kind of doesn't matter. We do have shared experiences with people our age group, but at the same time, I've never spoken with an old man who thought he was older than he was. He's like, I feel younger. I feel like I'm only 30,
Yeah.
And so this also applies to people who have more years under their belt. And
I was thinking about them in terms of, if they listen to this, will they feel like this is something that would benefit them and help them, in that second part,
right.
part of life?
I think it will, but the real answer is, if you're happy with how things are going, then go for it. That's all good. And if you would like to take a look at how you're living your life, then come on over and we'll explore some questions. I don't know how you should live your life. That's for you or anyone listening. That's for each person to decide for themselves. We just ask questions that allow the introspection for you to make your own decision about how you want to live. And in
that social context where you can talk about things and express yourself and find some clarity in your own thoughts and processes.
Yeah.
Rob, this has been fantastic. Can you just tell everyone where they can find you? And I'll make sure that we put all the links in the show notes.
Yeah, I can. My personal website is robnugen.com. And from there, it talks about my barefoot walking events mostly. That's the one that I've been doing in Japan recently. I'm just getting started with the Bold Life Tribe as a new program. And so we'll put that link on there as well. But robnugen.com is my personal site. Then there's mkpusa.org as the probably a better entryway into all things Mankind Project, or just mkp.org. And we have mkpjapan.org. So it's a whole litany of different links that are available. So we'll put them in the show notes.
The show notes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I haven't even talked about marbletrack3.com. Whole separate thing.
All different things. And you've done some amazing walks last March.
Yeah.
Last year you did a massive walk, and you took all those photos of the manhole covers, which was just thing. I just love the Japanese manhole covers. They're just
very cute. There's so many.
They are just works of art, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And some that are like inlaid with glass kind of thing, and to have, bright colors and such. So incredible.
Pictures and it was pretty amazing following your walk and seeing all these manhole covers.
Yeah, it's funny because walking barefoot is like I'm just watching my feet the whole way through.
Yeah.
Like, oh, there's a tree. Didn't even notice it because.
Yeah. All I can see are the manhole covers. Yeah. So you did a massive walk last year. So
yeah. That was something, and somehow I'm still planning to put my book together for that. So, gosh, I need some accountability on making my book. Yeah, and so it's about making choices in life. How do we want to?
Yeah.
What do we want to do now affects the future we create.
Hey, thanks so much for coming today, and
my pleasure.
Having a chat and telling us all about your wonderful work. And
thank you.
I'll talk to you on Friday.
Excellent. And at the same time, thank you for doing this and holding this space. It's important to have these conversations. So.
Yeah, it's such an important conversation.
Yeah.